Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session today. I'm going to give another minute or so just for people to join, because I can see the numbers are climbing. In the meantime, if you can see the chat box, the Q&A box, do let us know who you are, what your name is, and where you're joining us from. I know we've had interest from all over the MENA region. It'd be lovely to know where people are listening in from. Hi Emma, welcome from Qatar. I hope everything is okay in Qatar. Things are calming down and you're enjoying being back in school.
She's in my school, Nilina. It's great. We're perfect.
3 weeks
Hi,
now,
Emma.
right, Tash?
Sorry, what was that?
You're 3 weeks back in school.
Yeah.
Love
I'm starting to pay people now to say nice things about me.
it. Love it. We are 2 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to get us started. I've got 28 people on so far, so welcome to all 28 of you. We're going to be spending the next 60 minutes or so having a look at leadership, what makes a good leadership application, and what you might be doing to take your next steps on that journey. I'm Nalini Cook. I am the UAE WomenEd lead, and I'm joined today by a number of people who are going to introduce themselves in a moment, but just to shout out to my fellow WomenEd colleagues, Esther Mustama Daniels is very ably helping us with the tech and managing everything from the back end, and Tash Hilton, who you're going to hear a little bit more from shortly, is our boss in the region. She is the WomenEd lead for not only MENA, but also internationally. WomenEd, if you don't know about us, Esther, could I have the next slide, please? If you haven't come across us before, we are a global grassroots movement, and essentially we exist to connect aspiring and existing women leaders all over the world within education. We know that even though women dominate the education workforce, there are still huge gender and racial inequalities in the industry, particularly in terms of women in senior leadership roles, the large gender pay gap, and the number of women who perhaps want to stay in education, but due to the lack of flexibility of working conditions, etc., are not able to. Our main mission is to empower more women in education to have the choice to progress on their leadership journey. And so to achieve this, we work together to try and remove systemic and organisational barriers to progress and to elevate women to achieve their next leadership step. A couple of figures just there. For those of you who know me off screen, you'll know that I do have a little bit of data. So I'm just going to start today with a couple of quick slides, just illustrating why we're having this conversation today and why I believe WomenEd and their work that we do is really important. Women make up 61% of international school teachers, so that's globally, but they actually only make up 36 or 25% of international school SLTs. That depends on what you're looking at. There have been two studies done in recent years, one looking at for-profit schools within groups, and there it was 36%, so slightly better, but still nothing like the 61% of women in education. And the other looked at not-for-profits, that's the CIS study, which showed 25% of women making up SLT. So you can see there's a huge gap there. We believe there's a real need for women to be able to get into SLTs, leadership, whatever leadership may mean to you. Esther, could I have the next slide, please? Now, if you're sitting behind your screen thinking, I'm not actually ready to move into SLT, I'm not quite there yet, that's fine. You're just looking for your next role. stick with us. We've got plenty for you too. Everybody's a leader, whether it, you're a principal, a director, a head, an assistant head, whatever that may be. All of us lead, whether it's in our classrooms, our own teams, our students. You're all leading in some way, shape, or form. And so we're here to help you look at whatever your next role might be, or indeed your current role, and developing that and looking at why your work is important. What you can see on screen right now is exactly why it's important. There has been research done that suggests there is a correlation between female school leaders and higher learning outcomes. Not a huge study yet, and I've got the references if anybody wants those later, just shout so that you can read the academic studies yourself. But essentially, there is evidence that it actually really helps and supports not just girls within school, but actually learning outcomes for everybody. It's quite interesting and really important. Next slide, please, Erica. Now, I'm joined today by some lovely ladies who are going to talk us through their own experiences and also just a little bit of a chat of some questions that we've thought of that we think will uncover some of the pitfalls, the challenges, and the opportunities on what you can be doing to develop your own career. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. If I can start with you, Daisy, first on my screen.
Sure. So my name's Daisy. I'm the People and Culture Manager at Queen Elizabeth School, Dubai Sports City. I've actually only been here since October last year, so we're a brand new school opening as of this August. I moved to Dubai 5 years ago now, and I left straight from university after I studied law, and found myself in an independent international school in Dubai as a HR assistant. I then kind of worked my way up, worked for an independent school, and then also one of the biggest education groups out here, and now I am a HR manager, so work my way up into a founding school in Dubai Sports City.
Thanks, Daisy. I'm really pleased that you could be with us today. I know you've done lots of interviews and seen lots of CVs and applications. It's really great to add. Laura,
Yes.
you're next on my screen.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura. So I am assistant head teacher, teaching and learning curriculum at Arcadia British School in JBT. And I arrived in Dubai in August 2021 as a head of performing arts. I then moved to director of performing arts, associate assistant head, and then finally assistant head, all within the same school as well.
Amazing. And I think there's something to be learned from that. We're going to come back to that in a moment. And Tash, over to you.
Hi, so like you've said, I'm Natasha Hilton. I am currently Vice Principal at Park House English School in Qatar. I'm also the Strategic Lead for WomenEd, as Nalini said, as we started the session today. So I lead all of the groups outside of basically the UK and Europe. Started my kind of leadership journey in the UK, in a city. I was obviously in London. Was a deputy there, then moved over internationally to BSM in Oman with the lovely Esther, and we worked together for 6 years. Did lots of work there in and around teacher training, CPD for staff and developing staff, and then obviously got the VP role, well, head of primary first and then VP role at Park House, and have really continued on that journey and done lots of bits outside of that. Board for TESS and board for COBIS, and I'll go into that in more detail and the positive impacts that will have on your own leadership journeys too.
Thank you. And you heard a little bit about everybody's journey there. So we're originally going to ask you to tell us a bit more, but I think a lot more will come out as we're talking. So I'm going to jump straight in. We've asked about perhaps some of the hardest challenges you faced. Tash, I know because we've chatted before, it certainly wasn't a straight, easy, gentle slope of a journey to your current position. What was perhaps one of the hardest challenges you faced, and what was a surprisingly smooth transition to your current role?
Yeah, I would say it's just being given a chance, if I'm totally honest. It's always felt like just a real slog to even get a chance to kind of be able to try and sell yourself for any of these roles. And that I found quite challenging. I kind of always thought, right, I've got myself out there, my CV's looking great, and genuinely, like, you can't add anything more to my CV than I have possibly got. But just filling out applications and sending them off, especially for SLT roles, I could have sent off, I'm not even joking, like 30 applications genuinely, before I got my head of primary role in Qatar. And of those 30, I maybe got 3 people that kind of messaged back. Um, and that was really challenging, that like sense of rejection all of the time. That was really hard. Um, and then I kind of did a lot of work around, I suppose, solving that problem. I became really obviously disenfranchised. I felt really negative. I felt really rubbish about myself. And when you've kind of put everything in, and you feel like you've ticked every single box, and genuinely I ticked every single box. I went through every single spec and made sure I had done everything. And you still weren't getting a look in. That's really, really hard. Eventually, it was actually advice from my principal at the time, who is Kai Vasha, who actually Esther works for. And I'd spoken to him, and he said, you need to get a professional coach effectively, just to kind of help you with your CV writing, help you with, the types of questions that you're going to be asked. And so I did a number of other things, and networking is something that I think I will always advocate for, and I would say that it's had a massive impact on my own journey. But getting a professional coach was absolutely key for me. Um, it's a lady called Dr. Helen Wright, so I'm sure lots of you, if you're in the network at all, have heard about her. She's absolutely amazing. And she really sat me down and just got me out of my rut. Because obviously you just start with this whole, oh, I must be rubbish. No one wants me, la, 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 feeling absolutely sorry for myself. And she is the most positive person in the world, like annoyingly so, actually, because she's always positive. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world. She's like, you know what? There's always going to be a better day. Like, look at the, silver lining. And now, if I ever see her, literally, I have to smile, because I feel like I'm not allowed to not smile when I see her, just because she's so positive. But she really, really helped me to dig deep in terms of my own CV and what that looked like. And she just said to me, you're not selling yourself enough. You're not talking like you're a leader, and you've done all of these things. And I was always talking about, we did this and we did that. She said, no, what have you done? It's I did this and I did that, and this was the impact that I had. And that was really, really key to the way I changed my whole approach, because that was key to then, when I was eventually getting opportunities for interview and going through, I then actually completely changed the way I spoke about myself. And so, I was part of that barrier, along with all of the biases that we know are already out there. And there are biases. I'm a primary head, trained, and getting into a principal role as a primary head is like, you've already added on all of the layers of like, not to hire, on top of the fact that I'm a woman, I'm a little bit younger than other people, I'm not white, all of these things that were kind of in the negative for me. And I say they're negative because it's the reality of what we're facing. Okay. So everybody needs to understand that it is out there. I know some of the conversations I have, and then internationally on top of that, actually, when you're traveling with a family, when you're traveling with children, that can sometimes be a negative, because if schools have got budgets and you've got a family, they're going to be like, well, actually, got too many children, that's a negative. We can't hire them because it costs the school more money. So you kind of add to all of those things from an international perspective that possibly you wouldn't face in the UK as well. So that's kind of like the biggest barriers. Sorry, I've waffled on there. And then the smoother transitions, to be fair, all of these negatives that I talk about and sometimes you faced, the smoother transitions were actually about me recognizing and realizing that somebody choosing me to be in this school is as much my choice to be in the right space is just as an important of a choice. That's really, really important, and understanding where I would fit. So just because I've applied for a job and I'm like, right, I've learned not to just go for every single thing. Every single thing's fine if you just want to have the interview experience, and I definitely say get that, because it helps you later on. But being in the right space where you know you're going to be supported, where you know you're going to be given the opportunity to grow is just as important, and they actually, if not more important. So knowing that I was in a place where I could be authentic and authentically myself, that was really important. And when I have been in that space, I have then had colleagues around me that have been exceptionally supportive. My current principal, John Smith, he has absolutely advocated and supported me along the way. He has most probably, been the most shocked at some of the experiences that I've experienced. I'll give you one example. We're obviously during recruitment, we're going through recruitment phases, and he had spoken to a teacher. This was a couple of years ago, a teacher that we had just recruited, and she had gone into the room and he had talked to her about, he always meets with all the new staff and how's you settling in and how's it all been. And he said, what was it that made us different for all of the other jobs you applied for? And she'd said, I'd looked on the website and I saw people that looked like me. And he went, what? And didn't address it too much because she was new, didn't want to scare her off, and left it. Anyway, later on, we had a conversation, and he said, she said that to me, and I said, John, I did exactly the same thing. Like, if you're a female and you look and you say, well, actually, how many female leaders are in this school? Did you know, am I going to fit into this? And then for her and for me, it was like, well, actually, is there anyone that was like non-white in that leadership team? Did I feel like I was going to be able to be given an opportunity? That was key. And he obviously hadn't experienced that. And he just said, Jesus, that's seriously what you do? Like, and I was like, yeah, the website's really important. That's how we're first selling ourselves. And we need to make sure that's representative of what's out there. But actually, that's how lots of women feel going into these positions before we've even made applications. I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But that smooth transition to being in the right space where you've got people to support you, I almost didn't feel that was going to be the case. And it is out there as long as you're in the right space.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's really true. I've heard the same actually with doing separate panel discussions. I think the first time I heard it was probably about 5 years ago, and it was very much, I noticed after the panel at conference I was at, people came up to talk to the panelists, say, I've never seen anybody who looked like me, who looked like you in senior leadership, and it was really important. And for the people I was on the panel with, what school are you in? How can I apply? It's hugely powerful, and a really nice way of that, again, being able to suss out how supportive a school might be, at least as an initial interaction. Laura, I want to ask you about feeling ready for promotion and imposter syndrome. Now, I think you're, knowing you, I feel like you're the least likely person in the world to have ever had imposter syndrome. But I did a little poll on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, very unscientific, but it was the #1 reported challenge that came out in that poll. Did you feel that you had to be in a particular space to apply for promotion? Was your head in a particular state of readiness to get ready for promotion? And if so, how did you get there? How did you damp down any feelings of imposter syndrome?
That's so kind of you to say, because I don't think I've ever reached a point where I feel completely ready for an interview or for a promotion. But I think that's quite common. I think if you're ready for a role, if you feel ready for a role, then the chances are is you've either outgrown it or you're about to outgrow it very, very soon. I think what shifted in me was reframing the idea. So rather than thinking to myself, am I ready for this role? I was thinking more along the lines of, am I capable of growing into this role? And like, what can I bring to this role that's written on paper? And how am I going to make it my own? Because I think there's also something in recognizing a bit of confidence after you've taken that step. So after you've sent that cover letter or the letter of application of interest, because if we feel like we're 100% ready before we do something, then the chances are is we're going to miss the opportunity altogether. I think obviously the perfect headspace does not exist. But I think for me, it was the conscious decision to back myself. It was really interesting, Tash, when you alluded to the coach, because that was the first thing I did as well. was get myself a coach. And it was the coach that then helped me back myself. And, senior leadership interviews are not easy. It's not a quick process, and they are very intense, and they take a lot of emotional energy. And what I would say in terms of headspace is that you're ready for that. Like it's it is a draining experience, but arguably an interview scenario is one of the possible best CPDs you could do, in my opinion. So you've just got to be ready for that no matter what the outcome's going to be. You need to be ready for that emotional energy expense as well.
Not necessarily then feeling ready, but doing the prep that at least gives you confidence to go in there and say the right things. Get yourself in that headspace, even if it's not happening organically, I suppose. Tash, we've talked loads before about mentorship and support. I know how important it's been to you. Both you and Laura have mentioned coaches, and perhaps we circle back to that later, and unless you want to expand on it now. But did you have any, particularly in the earlier parts of your career, did you have any mentorship, any sponsorship along the way? And how did that help?
Yeah, so look, I think I've been really lucky. Well, I say lucky. I think I've been really selective in where I've worked, and I've made sure that I have worked in spaces where I knew that I was going to have people around me that could be my mentors. And that was really important for me when I was choosing where to work. So, just as much as that interview, we all need to see that interview process as a two-way process and not, I'm so lucky if these guys give me a job, right? I'm very much of, if I didn't get that role, look, absolutely, we're all going to shed a tear, we're all going to feel upset because it's a sense of rejection regardless. But I'm very much of the fact of the feeling, the thought that this was not meant to be. Yeah, and I'm okay with that because I know there's something definitely better for me in the future, and this was an experience I was meant to go through to get me to where I was meant to be. I genuinely believe that. It also keeps you positive, right? If you're constantly, because you are going to get knockbacks constantly in SLT roles. And naturally, that's going to happen because there are less positions available, right? So it's not about you personally sometimes, it's whether it's the right fit. So I've always made sure that I've been interviewing them as much as they've been interviewing me. And there have been times when I've been offered positions and I've turned them down. And other people are like, gosh, why would you have turned that down? And I was like, because I just knew that that wasn't the right space for me. I knew I wasn't going to, like Laura said, be able to grow, be able to, there's absolutely no point in me being there. Also, I've been interviewed by people that I know that I had more knowledge than, and I know what I'm like. You need to know yourself, and I know what I'm like, and I will absolutely have just sat there the whole time just saying, oh my gosh, did that person really just say that? How am I going to even get through the next day? And so there is no point in me working for somebody like that. I have to respect the person that I'm working for. But I also need to know that I had a relationship with somebody, that they were going to support me. And now I am never going to expect them to constantly give me positive. I'm not the type of person that needs positive praise all of the time anyway. But actually, I prefer to get really constructive feedback. And that's really important for me. But I really, really need, as a person, to feel that somebody is wanting me to grow, and that somebody is wanting to push me to be my better self, to be as good as I can be. And so whenever I've had those conversations and interactions with anyone, I've looked at them as, do you know what, could this person be a mentor to me? Do I respect them? Can I learn from them? Are they going to advocate for me to be able to progress professionally? And that's so my second head teacher, when I was in London and I became a deputy head, she did that for me. She was somebody that I was like, wow, I want to be like this woman in terms of how she supported me. And I've genuinely gone into every role. Now I'm in the position where I have, the privilege of being able to do that for other people. I have gone in every single time and said, right, I'm going to support everyone around me. Some people say, look, I want to be a class teacher. This is what I want to do. But I'm getting a little bit bored. What else can I do? And then I can say to them, well, actually, do you know what? There are blogs you can do. There are vlogs you can do. I can, connect you with Dan at Tess, and you can write articles for, for the international. They're all the things that people want to be able to share the best quality teaching and learning experiences that they're doing in the classroom, and that's fantastic. But then there are other people that are like, do you know what, Natasha? Well, eventually I want to be a principal, and I'm like, all right. You've been teaching for 2 years. That's fantastic. These are the things that you're going to need to do. But I'm going to support you with that. So that mentorship that I've received, I would like to hope that I'm giving that back as well. And I will always say, pay it forward. It's been done for me, and it's something that I would always say that I need to do for other people as well. Like, I can't thank the people enough around me that have done that. And that was my head, who's a female head in the primary school I was in when I was in London. And I would say that when I was at BSM, I got the same from Kai. He was amazing, and he absolutely supported my growth there. And when I felt, like Laura said, I got to a point where I was like, yeah, I can do this with, standing on my head now. I moved to Park House, and I've had exactly the same from John. And I don't think that's coincidental. I think that's because I have actively shaped the leader that I know I can go in and work for. That's really important.
That's a really interesting point, because I think you're quite right. So often we look at a job and it's all about the job and the job description that's on paper, and do we like the look of the school? But actually the culture, the values that the people
Absolutely.
there have are so important. Now, obviously we need jobs, we need salaries, we've all got bills to pay and families to support, etc. But actually, I suppose, drilling down and finding the right setting for you, fundamentally, that means that long term, there's a much greater chance of success, and not just for you, but for the whole relationship working, better for you, for the school, for the leadership that's there. So I think that's a really important point that both Tash and Laura have touched on. I don't know who I'm throwing this out to you, but I mean, essentially, I think all three of you. In your experience, would you say that it is then easier to get your first leadership break at your current school, or are you better shifting to a new school and kind of resetting your professional identity as a leader? Laura, I know you did it in your current school. You've sort of climbed the ladder in the same setting. Can I start with you, and then if anybody has anything else to chime in, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my leadership journey has been entirely internal in terms of senior leadership. So when I arrived at Arcadia, I arrived in middle leadership. I think again, and this is something that Tasha were talking about earlier, and I'm not going to use the word lucky about the people that I've worked under, because I was lucky enough to have multiple opportunities and choices when I chose to move to Dubai regarding which head of performing arts role that I took. And it was looking at the leadership and who I was going to look up to, because having, whether it's a paid mentor or coach, or whether it is just my line manager, having someone that I can look up to and I can learn from is extremely important for me. And I think the moment I personally don't have that in a workplace is the moment I start second guessing my future at that workplace. I have felt that in my current job, there is space. So for me, it was, yes, I internally have a deeper understanding of the context, but also I think it's about looking at the leadership team and going, do I fit with them? And what do I have to offer that they aren't currently offering? So even as a middle leader, it was saying yes to opportunities that didn't necessarily fall within my remit or my comfort zone, whether it was saying yes to offering a whole school CPD on voice projection, because my background's performing arts. It was about presence and our voice and how we use it in the classroom. Or even just about having those difficult conversations that I hadn't yet had in my career, that needed to happen because we were a small school and the leadership team was very small. So it was about giving back and just moving out of my comfort zone a little bit sooner than what I thought I was going to. But it was only in those moments that then I realized I was growing my own leadership skills. So I guess whereas in my previous school in the UK, which was in a rural space in Kent, beautiful school, and the SLT team, they were a force to be reckoned with. And individually, they were great, but as a team, they were outstanding. But they weren't going anywhere. They were they were all quite young. Everyone had a family. Everyone was very settled. They weren't going anywhere anytime soon. And the head of faculties just below them were also outstanding. So me as a head of drama, right at the bottom of the pecking order, I would have been lucky to reach senior leadership before I retired if I stayed in that school. So those are like two very different extreme ideas. I do believe that if I didn't move when I did, I would have had a ceiling above my head a lot sooner than what I have.
I think there's two really good points there. One is that, you can get to know your own context if you're staying within the same school, but also if you are at a school that's well established, and that's great. I think we're in quite a fortunate position in the Middle East in that it is a really dynamic, growing market. Schools are opening, schools are expanding all the time. Those opportunities might come up more frequently if you are looking at advancing your career. But I think also what you talked about earlier on in your response, in terms of finding those people to look up to, and that's relevant to anybody, whether you're a teacher of class teacher, whether you're already in middle leadership looking to get into senior leadership, across your whole career, that's relevant. And I think that's really something great to bear in mind. Daisy, I'm going to come to you because you've been so patient. Thank you. We've talked a little bit about what people should be looking for, the headspace they need to be in, that sort of motivation. Now, you're the person who sees the other side of that then, in terms of once people have made those decisions, they're applying, they're sending through CVs, applications, etc., and you're looking through all of those.
Yeah.
Of the thousands of teacher CVs or application forms, cover letters, etc., that you've seen, what are the things that really stand out? What makes somebody stand out on an application? And perhaps what are some things to avoid?
Sure, yeah. So I come at this from the other side of the table, from Laura and Natasha, and it's really nice to hear from the other side, and to hear the disheartening when you don't get the job, or when you do, and have that support from HR. And that's where I kind of come in, and our job as HR is to make sure that they feel supported throughout the whole recruitment process, right into the onboarding, and when they start at the school as well. So I kind of get to see right from the very beginning of meeting these candidates that are trying to make all the success on their CV, get them an interview, and then from that interview actually get them into the school. So it's all about support from my side. But yeah, there's loads of things, and I think with Dubai being so transient at the moment, there are lots of opportunities, but it also means there's lots of competition as well, in not just in education but all sectors. So I'm lucky enough to have worked in the UK as well, so I can kind of see those differences and see how that's been changed into a positive in the Middle East. So there is loads of opportunities. But yeah, as you know, there's loads of recruitment platforms out there for educators, the main one being TESS. And we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of applications for not just teaching positions, leadership, but support positions as well. So there's lots of little kind of tips and tricks. I think there's an average of or a statistic that's a HR or a recruiter will look at a CV for a maximum of about a minute, maybe even 30 seconds, because they are screening so many a day, especially in peak recruitment season. So there are times when me and my leadership team are looking at 50, 60 CVs a day for one position. So I mean, taking it right back to basics, don't focus too much on making it look colourful and creative, and because then that kind of, it sometimes takes away from the actual content and the things that we really are interested in. But of course, make it presentable and organised. I'd say structure is quite important. So make sure those qualifications are right at the top. I mean, if you're not qualified for a teaching position, unfortunately, that it's going to be a complete we can't even progress with the application into an interview. So layout, so qualifications right at the top. Don't focus I personally, in my opinion, don't focus too much on a personal statement. Again, there's not that much time for us to be reading through the whole thing. So yeah, really focusing on the important bits. So facts and statistics are really, really important to get into a CV. We don't just want to see that you can say that you can do the job. We want to see that you have proven that you can actually do the job to a high standard. Maybe taking a department from a good rating to a very good rating because I implemented X, Y, and Z, or something like that, to make it a bit more specific. But yeah, it's a snapshot of you, and I think try not to overload it sometimes. I think it doesn't need to be every single thing that you do on a day-to-day basis. It really should just be a snapshot, because we don't have time to be scrolling through 5 pages of writing. But yeah, again, it's a very personal thing as well, I think, a CV.
Thank you. It's interesting because I think there may be some people listening who sort of, one of the things that you said there was, don't just talk about what you've done, show us that you've done it. And if you're thinking about progressing, your initial reaction might be, but I haven't done it yet. So how can I prove I've done it? I think the thing is to circle back to what Laura said earlier, is things like delivering whole school PD. Within your current role, how have you stepped above and beyond in that? Highlight those things, highlight the changes that you've made, show evidence of that. We talk about that such a lot in education, evidencing things, but we need to apply that to ourselves as well as students. I think certainly, and we're talking a lot about, and I'm aware that all three of you are from British schools, and you may or may not be in a British school listening. So obviously things might be slightly different, but we also know that I think it's almost 60% of schools in the region are British curriculum schools. So I think this is going to be relevant for the majority of people here. British people have an issue with modesty and bragging, I think it's safe to say, and it's quite a fine line between it sometimes, and I think even more so for women. Kind of line between being too modest and being overconfident. It can be really hard to get right on an application or a CV. Daisy, how can women sell themselves without feeling like they're bragging and just trumpeting? I did this, I did that.
Yeah, I think it's all down to wording. But you are right. Ultimately, there is a fine line, I'd say, but ultimately we are trying to sell ourselves. So we have to be bold as well. As you said, like, women are at a disadvantage sometimes. Not that we chose to be in that position, but we have to be bold. And I think it's down to the phrases and how we say things in the CV. So kind of shifting from our opinions of what we do to evidence and those factual kind of statistics is really, really important, because we can all kind of say, I can do this and I can do that, but actually showing it is a different thing. And honesty, obviously, and honesty, integrity go a really, really long way. I would never recommend fabricating things. I know we can kind of twist things and make them sound maybe slightly better than they are, but it's only going to kind of hurt you down the line if you're fabricating too much. But yeah, facts are really, really useful here. And claiming to be good at a job is one thing, and then showing it is the other. But also, I've seen CVs quite recently, actually, where ChatGPT is making things a bit more vague, or a bit not as specified to you, which can sometimes come across as you're not actually as qualified or as skilled for the role. So I would be really conscious of using, or how much AI we're using as well in CVs. But yeah, I think it's actually harder to come across as boasting than it is to be modest. So I would say, be more bold in a CV than you think you need to be.
Fair enough, thank you. Laura, I could see you nodding away there about GPT. Makes me think you might have seen a little bit
Yeah,
to tell when somebody's put a CV through AI.
yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of those this academic year. But I was just when Daisy was talking about the modesty and the overconfidence, the best piece of advice I received a couple of years ago regarding a CV writing and cover letter writing was, what would a white man do? Right. So if a white man would have the audacity to write that they are a confident strategic leader, why shouldn't you?
I
So
like
when
that.
we're thinking, Is your vocabulary too soft? Just ask yourself, would a white man write that?
Good, good tip there. Cash, I feel like I'm confident that you will have something to add to this because I know that you've actually helped and coached me with things like this in the past. So
Yeah.
how can we be confident without being too confident?
Yeah, I just think on your CV you just can't be too confident. I think the confidence element you need to worry about when you're face to face having an interview because then that comes across as arrogant. So that's that at that point, that's when you need to kind of rein yourself in a little bit. I'm gonna kind of go all the way to the beginning here where obviously I go through recruitment for senior leadership positions, right? And so what I'm going to say to you is, a couple of years ago, we were recruiting for the head of secondary at the school, 150 applications. I will tell you, I only had about 10 women out of those 150 applications. If you're not in it, you can't win it. It's basically the first thing I'm going to say to you. And so, a bit like what Laura said there, do you know how many white men applied for that job and literally had zero experience? It was absolutely shocking. Yeah, absolutely shocking. But they're bold enough and confident enough to make an application. They don't care. And so I think where women go wrong is they look at the spec and they're like, oh, well, don't hit that, don't hit that, don't hit that, and then they don't apply. So the first thing you need to do is just get it out of your head about whether you hit that spec and just apply. You don't know who else has applied. And you need to remember when we're going through applications, first of all, Daisy, I bet you can second this. 60% of them don't even have a qualification. 60% of them will be a mum or a dad and say, I've got children, therefore I can be a head of school. I'm not even joking to you. Okay. I'm not joking. Yeah. So that's the first thing. So you don't know who else has applied. So put yourself in there. Doesn't matter if you've hit every single part of the spec because genuinely we put a spec together, but that just is there to give people a general idea of what we want. If you're in schools, you absolutely know what the role of a head of school is, what the role of a principal is, and you know what that looks like in terms of applying for it. The other thing that Laura said was, making sure that you're kind of ready for the role. And Laura also said that she had done things and put herself out there. I've just recruited for an assistant head in my school, literally, handed out offers yesterday. And one of the things that the person that was successful for the role said to me was, she said, when I first started here, Natasha, one of the things that she'd said to me in one of our very first interviews, oh yeah, I want to be a principal one day. And I said, fantastic. I said, what you need to do in this school is you need to show me that you can do the job. So you need to be doing the job, especially an internal applicant. You need to be doing the job before you get the job. So don't sit there and go, oh, well, I don't get paid to do that. Or, oh, well, I don't get recognized for that. Trust me, people might not be patting you on the back all of the time, but they absolutely recognize what you're doing. Absolutely, they'll recognize what you're doing. So it's really, really important that you put yourself out there when you've got inspectors come in, when you've got this going on, when you've got that going on, when you see an email go out saying, does anyone want the opportunity to shadow this person or do this or do that? Absolutely throw yourself in the ring. Yeah, absolutely make your internal applications because even if you don't get it at that point, at least SLT members in the school are like, well, actually, I know that person is now interested. I know how I can help to direct some of their career for them and give them opportunities. That's really, really, really important. And then one of the things that Daisy said a number of times there is about facts and figures. It's about basically from a school perspective, it's about showing the impact that you have had on your current school, in your current schools. Yeah. So it's, I led the change of this curriculum and it meant that this many children achieved a da-da-da-da at the end of the year. We want to see what impact you have had on the changes that you've made in the school. They're significant. Don't put nonsense at the end, a bit like Daisy said. I don't want to know that you worked in McDonald's when you were 15. Genuinely, I do see that sometimes. Your CV needs to just give me what that role is requiring of you. That's really, really important. And so what I'm going to say to you as well is people just have a bog standard CV. That's absolutely fine. But your CV needs to change in exactly the same way as you would write a letter of application. Yeah. So Daisy has made it really clear. We don't want big, long personal statements. Absolutely. Listen, I've got a minute and a half to go through everyone's CV. I'm telling you that now. If it's a 4-page CV, I'm unlikely to look at the fourth page. the personal statement needs to be short, but it needs to be about the role you're applying for. So if this role is an assistant head of or inclusion, that personal statement needs to link to inclusion. If you're then applying to another school and it's an assistant head of teaching and learning, that personal statement needs to link to teaching and learning. We don't want it to be a generic, oh, I'm a great leader. I need to know that you've really looked at it. And also try your best to link it to the school you're applying to. Definitely don't have the wrong name of the wrong school in your CV. Trust me, I've seen that a couple of times. And I can imagine Daisy's like, cross, moving on. You haven't even taken the time, right? You haven't even taken the time to edit.
Awkward.
Absolutely, absolutely. But making sure that you're mentioning things. If the school's got learning values, or if the school's got this learning language that they use, put that in, because actually we're like, well, do you know what? They've made the effort to it. Bare minimum, look at the website. Yeah, so they're really, really key things. But just draw it all the way back to, can you just please apply for the jobs? That would be great. Gives us a starting point to work with.
Very true. We've got quite a lot of questions coming through now, so I'm conscious that I want us to have time to go to those. Can I then ask you, I'll open it to the floor, because I think all of you have this, you're all looking at applications. But just for a quick sort of 30-second response, is there anything on a CV or an application that would be an immediate red flag for you? Anything that comes to mind? Daisy?
Maybe not on in a CV. I'm going to go maybe interview. So we obviously, safeguarding as it is the most paramount importance to every school. We have a standard set safeguarding question. So if you can't even tell me the basics of what safeguarding and safer recruitment is, unfortunately, I wouldn't pass you forward to the next stage. So really do not even just do your research, but really clue yourself up on it.
Thank you. Laura? Anything that kind of screams to you in an application?
Very similar to Daisy's theme, I would have said random gaps on the CV as well.
Yeah.
Because
it's okay to have had a gap, but just explain what it was.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people do have gaps, and sometimes it's because they've gone away and they've learned a great deal in that time, but state what that is and what the reason is, because otherwise it is a safeguarding issue. Wondering what they were doing in that time.
Yeah.
Ash, anything from you that would be a red flag if you saw it in an initial application?
Yeah, I think both safeguarding, absolutely. If you can't even answer that, I can't put you in any leadership position. That's a given. The gaps, like Laura said, I will. If sometimes there are gaps, and I will then put them through, but then challenge those gaps at interview, which I think most of us would do generally, because some people just have not quite realised how to do a CV, and CVs can be quite challenging in and around that. For me, it's just more I don't know how to put this in a nicer way, really, just sloppiness. Like, if you've put you've put the wrong school name in, if you haven't even tried to link it to the application, that in itself, I won't even give you if I've read something like 2 lines and it says the wrong school name, I'm not even looking through the rest of it. You could be a principal of the highest best school in the world. I'm not even going to touch you with a barge pole. The other thing that actually red flags me a little bit sometimes is if somebody is looking to step down quite a few steps. So if they've been a principal in the school and they're making an application for a teacher, I question that sometimes. That's like, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't put me off necessarily, but I do have a question about that, and I'm 100% going to ask you that interview. So I wouldn't say it's a red flag,
explanation to that.
Yeah, I need to understand why. Yeah, some people it's just like, do you know what? I can't. I took a step back when I moved from the UK to internationally. I was a deputy head and I went in as a year leader, and it was just because I was progressing too quickly. I was doing my NPQH. I'd only been teaching for 6 years. It was just all too much. I had a young family, and I was like, whoa, like this is just going too fast for me. I was just doing too much, and I could explain that, and that was fine, But yeah, I do question that sometimes.
Okay, I think I'm going to actually add one there. Not that anybody asked me, but I'm going to ask myself, which is that if you see things on LinkedIn, because I get this a lot, I try where I do see leadership opportunities to share them on LinkedIn. I share it on the WomenEd groups, etc. There can be a tendency in this part of the world to just comment interested. I'm not going to do anything about that. If you are interested, it is up to you to look into that job, to find out more about it, and to apply for it in the appropriate channels. It's just a really, I guess, bad habit in this area, this part of the world, where we get a lot of that interested. And if I'm perfectly honest, if you apply for a job with me and you've just mentioned interested, I'm actually probably going to take you off the list, because it just shows such a lack of investment or interest in what is on offer. So that's just my 2 pence worth. Hopefully I've not upset or offended anybody. It's helped. I'm just going to move us over to interviews quickly, and I'm conscious I'm literally going to give you a minute each, Laura and Daisy, sorry. But I do want to get to the questions. With some really nice questions here. Laura, you've recently had your promotion into senior leadership. And we talked earlier about imposter syndrome and that sort of being ready, and you yourself mentioned kind of actively getting yourself in the headspace, in the ready zone. What preparation helped you, when you went for that interview for assistant head? What helped you ace that interview?
Well, very similar to what Taff was saying earlier as well, and what I alluded to about putting yourself out there. I was already doing a lot of what the job spec was saying. So in my head, because I'd been interviewed for senior leadership positions last year as well, and reflecting on it myself, one of my biggest weaknesses is I didn't have the experience. And I think a lot of people fall down in interviews because they don't have the experience to talk about it. But I kind of took it into my own hands that, okay, I'm not in the position officially, so I can't therefore talk about it. But instead of, I guess, moaning about the fact that I don't have the experience because I'm not in the position, I gave myself the experience. So then I knew that I'd be in a confident space to talk about it. Pre-interview, I'd told myself that I was going to put myself out there for assistant head roles this year, whether it was internal or external. And I actually made a strategic plan, my own little self, for myself in terms of what I wanted to do before Christmas, because I knew the recruitment window was going to be December, January for an SLT position of a school year. And I made sure then that I could speak clearly and confidently, articulating what my impact was. So very similar to what we have already discussed, but what I have done that's above and beyond my role, and also what the impact of that was. I think for me as well, one of the massive things that I changed from the interviews that I weren't successful in was I moved away from my specialism. I think it's really, really easy to talk about performing arts and directing a musical and leading a faculty because that is my comfort zone, that's my bread and butter, but that's not what the assistant head role was. And I think it's really important to show that you're dynamic, so not falling back onto your comfort zone. So I was thinking of ways that my values and my leadership transitions across whole schools. It was really making sure that I wasn't falling back on examples from my comfort zone essentially. And I was speaking a lot to myself. I was walking around my apartment talking to myself a lot because it's so easy to in your head go, right, okay, I know the answer to that. I know what I can bring. I know what impact I've done. But when you articulate it out loud, you can then criticize yourself and go, oh, actually, I need to say it in a different order. That doesn't come across as well. And I think that is such a powerful tool.
Practicing.
Yeah,
Can I just add
I
to
would
that?
agree.
This is where you need to get that mentor, your coach, to go through things with you. Like, do not think that you can just do that with yourself, because they will highlight where you're like, you sound a little bit weak, or that's not a great example there. Use other people to support you through that. Get them to check through your CV, get them to check through your applications, do practice runs of interview questions, get them to give you questions as well and challenge you in some of the questions that you might not have solid examples for. And if any of you kind of teach GCSE or A level, that give your opinion. What is it? Your opinion, your explanation, your example. Like, you need to do those three things every single time. You know, you need to give a really solid example and give a range, like Laura's just said, but make sure you're clear and you're concise. You know, if you start waffling, sometimes you're going to go off on a tangent. That does happen naturally. People like myself, I do. But rein yourself back in. Recently, actually, when I've been interviewing people, quite a few of them have written down the question. It's not something I've naturally done, but it didn't bother me as somebody that was interviewing. And actually, it helped them to keep referring to the question so that they didn't go off on a, you know, on a bit of a story. It was really good that they kept looking down and going, oh, yeah, that was what I was answering. A really good tactic in interview.
Yeah, I really like that point actually, Natasha. I've seen people do that, and I think sometimes we forget that in an interview, it's not a test. Like, we really are just trying to get the best out of you and give you that environment to be able to do so. I think sometimes the nerves can get the better of us. So even just at the beginning of an interview, just, you know, just remembering that all I need to do is just show them what I have done. There's not a right or, I mean, there are some wrong answers sometimes, but it's more just about explaining yourself, and that writing down the question again, because if you've misunderstood a question, you're then much more likely to go on a tangent. So yeah, it's all about kind of concise and making sure that you understand.
And it's okay to ask people to repeat. Like,
yeah,
to
or
repeat the
rephrase.
question.
Yeah,
Repeat the phrase. And also, as a little trick, when you are writing that question down, it does give you a little bit more thinking time, which I realised. I was like, maybe they're just giving themselves more thinking time. But you can't question it, because actually, you know, so it's a good tactic too. So if you want to do that as a bit of a trick, go for it.
I like it.
Actually, yeah, I think that's really important though, to remember that actually in an interview, nobody's trying to trick you. They are asking you the questions to try to give you the opportunity to highlight what you've done. And I think if you can get into that mindset, that really helps with the nerves and also with your performance in there. I think I'm gonna kind of just do a quick, almost out of nowhere now, but one of the things that is really opaque in this region is talking about salaries. And there will come a point in any job offer, negotiation, interview process where we have to come to salaries. And one of the things that WomenEd works on is trying to reduce that gender pay gap, which we know is there. Packages can vary absolutely wildly in this part of the world. Unfortunately, it sometimes depends on people's passports as well as a variety of other things. But Tash, I'll come to you initially first, but again, Daisy, Laura, please feel free to chime in with your experience and advice. Tash, what's your advice for a woman who's perhaps been offered a particularly leadership role, but they feel that the package is below the value that it should be at? How do you go about negotiating that?
Okay, so I'm gonna go with two things here. First of all, even if you don't think it's particularly low, ask for more. Because they're not going to, like, if there is a room for negotiation, they're not going to go in with their highest offer, by the way. Yeah, they're going to go in expecting you to negotiate, right? So go in and see if there's room for negotiation. Now, I will tell you that there are some schools, and I'll give you the example, my school, there is no room for negotiation. We've got this pay scale, this pay scale. So it's really transparent. Everyone gets paid exactly the same. If you're below 5 years, you get this. If you're under 5 years, you get this. You know, if you're a senior leader, you get this at this level. At this level, you get this at this, you get that. That's actually simple and easy because you know what you're getting. And if anyone tries to negotiate with me, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's your housing allowance. That's what you get for your child. That's what you get for your pay. There is no room for negotiation. We don't do that so that there's equity across the school and no one's going in a staff room and going, oh, I got this and I managed to haggle this and all of that kind of thing. So that's nice and simple. And if you get that answer, you accept it and you decide whether it's what you believe you deserve. If you're not sure about that, like I've said, go in and ask for more. And it might be that you are asking for, you know, more housing. It doesn't necessarily mean the wage, but it might be more housing. It might be, oh, you know, I need, I don't know, 100% of my school fees paid and I was only going to be offered 50 and things like that. You don't even know them yet most of the time anyway. So what's the harm in just sending over an email? By the way, we get these emails all the time. So all of that you worrying and scared to ask, we receive them all the time. And so we're used to, I know from your perspective, Daisy, you must be used to sending out your standard email or, okay, I'm going to go back to finance and see if I can negotiate that with you. Prime example, just before I kind of finish here, I did have a member of staff that came in and spoke to me about somebody that had applied at another school and they were offered low kind of wage. And she got the money. So clearly, you know, she was like, I can't believe it. I wasn't even going to ask. And I'm like, well, you're silly. Because, you know, just ask. What's the worst that they can say? No. And then I'm just going to accept what they've given me if I was okay with that anyway. Don't know.
I'll just add one thing onto that, maybe from a HR perspective, because you're so right. I get this. I'd say maybe like 40% of people now will come back and ask for a negotiation, have a justification for it. You know, we have a pay scale that we have, and every school will have a pay scale, and they need to make it fair across years of experience or qualifications, however they do that. So if you are negotiating and you feel that you deserve more, make sure there's a justification in there, because just coming back asking for more doesn't then give me a reason to go back and ask for more from management or whoever it is. So yeah, make sure there's a justification in there.
Tasha's done a really good job of answering quite a lot of the questions in the chat box. Thank you so much. If you feel you'd like a deeper dive to the answer of your question, feel free to get in touch with any of us. We're all on LinkedIn and would be very happy to respond to further questions. There is a question about LinkedIn, which I think is probably appropriate to just finish up with. It's about how to strategically position yourself on platforms like LinkedIn to signal for leadership opportunities rather than just job seeking. Tash is typing at the moment. I would add to that, I think, showing that you have got some thought leadership, that you are interested in that space, putting things out there rather than expecting opportunities to come to you. But you're going to have to take it off LinkedIn as well. Get yourself to conferences, do some networking, join your local WomenEd group if that's appropriate. Those kinds of things. I hope we've answered most of the things. As I said, get in touch with us at LinkedIn. Via LinkedIn, or if you've got our WhatsApp numbers, please feel free to get in touch. One of the things that really came out of this conversation for me was that real support of people having coaches or mentors. And I think that is incredibly important. If you don't have a coach, please do consider getting one. I know they're not always super affordable, but there are some affordable people out there. But it's also, to be perfectly honest, worthwhile having a coach, even if it's just for a few sessions. Even if you only do 1 or 2 sessions, I think you'll find it worthwhile. If you follow WomenEd, please do keep an eye out, because we will be launching our own mentorship program in June. And there'll be plenty more information coming out about that. Whether you feel you're in a position to mentor somebody, or if you would like mentoring, we'll be launching that at the beginning of June. So keep in touch with all of us to hear more about that. Esther, could you push on my slide to the next one, please, just to finish up? And if you can't have a coach just right now, I do recommend at least getting a couple of informative, supportive books to try and build a little bit of that information up for yourself. These are some that are on my, I've either read or are on my reading list that multiple people have recommended to me. So again, feel free to take a screenshot, a snapshot. They're all about you pushing yourself as a woman, whether it's into leadership or whether it's just onto whatever is next for you. And I've got some really great reading in there. I'm going to finish simply by saying thank you. Thank you for giving up an hour of your Friday afternoon, whether it's your weekend or you're just starting your weekend in the UAE. We've loved having you with us. We hope it's been useful. Hope you've made some connections. If you are based in the UAE, in Oman, in Bahrain, in Qatar, or in Saudi, we have WomenEd on the ground there, and we have meetings face to face, coffees and catch ups and things. So please get in touch. You'd be very welcome to join whatever the next one is. But if you're somewhere else in the MENA region, or just doesn't suit you, we have these ongoing webinars. There's think we've got one scheduled every other week. So keep an eye out and hopefully we can help support you. So thank you very much, everybody. We've loved having you with us. Have a great weekend and take care. We hope to see you in person very soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye.